Clara Haynes stood on the pavement, suitcase in hand, staring up at the weathered facade of number 47 Marlborough Crescent. The building was tall, narrow, and lined with ivy that curled like green veins across the aged bricks. She had only seen it in photos, blurry ones, at that, but it was hers for now. A new start. A clean slate. Her flat was on the 3rd floor. The climb up the creaking staircase with her bags felt endless, but she welcomed the burn in her arms. It reminded her she was alive, independent again, and far from the controlling voice of Oliver, her ex-boyfriend. The flat was modest. A kitchenette, a small lounge with a bay window, and a narrow bedroom that smelled faintly of lavender and dust. As she unpacked, she glanced out the window and saw the flat opposite, number 49. Its windows were shut and the curtains drawn, except for the one directly across from hers. Behind the sheer curtains stood a figure. Clara froze. For a moment, she assumed it was her own reflection, but then the figure moved. Slowly. Deliberately. A woman, standing still, staring straight at her. She stepped back, heart thudding. The curtain fluttered slightly, and the figure vanished. Later that evening, Clara asked the landlord, Mr. Mowbray, an elderly man with nicotine-stained fingers and a fondness for whiskey, about the flat next door. That one's been empty for years, he said with a dismissive wave. Belonged to a man who passed away. No one's taken it since. Why do you ask? Clara hesitated. I thought I saw someone there. A woman. Mr. Mowbray chuckled dryly. Love, these old buildings creak and groan. You're probably seeing shadows or reflections. First week always feels strange. Clara nodded, but her stomach turned. She hadn't seen a shadow. The woman had features. Shape. Hair. Movement. And the most unsettling part. She looked just like Clara. That night, sleep came in short waves. The radiator clanked sporadically, and the floorboards seemed to sigh beneath the weight of nothing. At 3 a.m, Clara awoke with a start. Not because of a sound, but because of a feeling. She sat up, rubbed her eyes, and walked slowly to the window. The curtain of the opposite flat was drawn again. But the woman was back. This time, her face was pressed against the glass. And she was smiling. The next morning, Clara barely touched her tea. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through the messages on her phone, pretending to be preoccupied. But in truth, her thoughts remained fixed on the woman from the night before, the one with her face. By midday, Clara decided to take a walk along the Brighton seafront, hoping the salt air would clear her head. The gulls screamed above, waves rolled against the shore, and a street musician played a haunting violin piece that made her shiver. But peace eluded her. As she returned to the flat, something in her chest tightened. She could feel it again, that she was being watched. Back inside, Clara locked the door behind her. The sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains. She stood in the middle of the lounge, listening. Silence. But it was not comfortable. It felt rehearsed. Like the flat was holding its breath. Determined to distract herself, she began unpacking an old box of books and personal things. In the bottom corner, wedged between 2 photo frames, was a small black envelope she didn't remember packing. She sat down and opened it. Inside were 6 Polaroid photographs. She flipped through them slowly. The first showed her standing at the window, wearing her blue jumper. Strange, she hadn't taken it. The second showed her sleeping in bed, her back turned. The third was from the hallway, taken behind her, as though someone had followed her. The fourth made her drop the stack. It was taken in the bathroom. She was brushing her teeth. Looking into the mirror. But instead of a reflection, there was another version of her, standing directly behind her, eyes open wide. Clara's skin crawled. She snatched up the remaining photos with trembling fingers. In the fifth, she was sitting on the sofa, eating cereal. The version of her from the bathroom was standing at the window, watching. The sixth was a close-up of her face while she slept. She rushed to the front door and checked the lock. Still secure. The windows were shut, nothing broken. She ran to the kitchen, yanked open the drawers. No sign of intrusion. Yet someone had been inside. Someone had photographed her in her most private moments. Her head spun. Was she losing it? Was this some twisted prank? No, none of her friends knew where she had moved. And she had told no one except her landlord and solicitor. Then a thought struck her. She lifted the fourth photo again, the one with the mirror. She stared at the image, heart thudding in her ears. The version of her in the mirror wasn't just staring. She was smiling again. And in her hand, she was holding a camera. Clara didn't sleep that night. The Polaroids lay face down on the kitchen counter, as though turning them over might silence the creeping sense of madness taking root in her chest. Every creak of the floorboards made her flinch. Every gust of wind outside sent shivers down her back. By morning, she looked pale, eyes ringed with fatigue. She forced herself to eat a piece of toast, but it turned to ash in her mouth. The only thing that kept her tethered to reason was the decision she made just before dawn. She was going to speak to the neighbors. There were 4 other flats in the building. She started with the one beneath her, flat 2. A middle-aged woman answered the door, hair tied back, a baby crying somewhere behind her. "Sorry to bother you," Clara said softly. "I just moved in upstairs. I was wondering if you've ever seen anyone in the flat opposite mine. Number 49. The woman frowned. "That one's empty, love. Been that way since I moved in 3 years ago. Strange place, that one. Cold even in summer. Never liked the look of it. Have you ever heard anything from inside?" The woman gave her a curious glance. "No. Should I have?" Clara forced a smile. "Probably not. Just settling in, I suppose." But the unease returned tenfold. Next, she tried the flat next door to hers, flat 4. No answer. She knocked again, waited. Still nothing. Finally, she descended to the ground floor and knocked on Mr. Mowbray's flat. It took a while before the door creaked open. He looked even more rumpled than usual, eyes bloodshot. "You again," he said, not unkindly. "Something wrong?" "I found something in my flat," Clara said. "Photos. Of me. Taken inside. I haven't told anyone where I live, and the locks haven't been touched." He rubbed his chin. "Are you saying someone's been inside?" Clara hesitated. I think there's someone in flat 49. Someone who looks like me." Mr. Mowbray stared at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Come in." His flat was dark, thick with the smell of tobacco and old carpet. He poured 2 cups of lukewarm tea and sat across from her at the cluttered kitchen table. "Did your solicitor tell you anything about this building?" he asked. "Just that it was built in the 1890s. Converted to flats in the 80s. That's true. But before that, during the war, it was owned by a private research institute. They did strange things here. Sound experiments. Reflection manipulation. Some say it was just psychological testing, but others believed they were trying to fracture identity itself." Clara blinked. "What does that even mean?" "Means you might not be the first one to see something you shouldn't." Before she could respond, there was a knock at Mr. Mowbray's door. 3 soft raps. He frowned. Not expecting anyone. He opened the door. No one was there. The corridor was empty. But lying on the doormat, neatly placed, was another Polaroid photo. He picked it up slowly, then handed it to Clara. It showed her, Clara, standing inside Mr. Mowbray's kitchen. But she hadn't left her seat. And in the photo, she was holding a knife. Clara stared at the photo until her eyes blurred. The image burned into her brain, her own hand, holding a knife, in a kitchen she had not moved from. Her stomach twisted with something deeper than fear. This was no longer a question of paranoia. Something, was playing a game with her. Mr. Mowbray leaned back slowly. "You should leave, Clara. Whatever's going on in that flat, it's not natural. Some things are better left shut." But Clara shook her head. "No. I need to know. I need to see it for myself." He sighed, rubbed his temples, then pulled a ring of keys from a drawer. "You didn't get this from me." The hallway outside seemed darker than before. The air was still, as if waiting. Clara turned to the door of number 49. She hesitated. Her heart pounded in her throat. She slid the key into the lock. It turned with a dry click. The door opened. The flat beyond was cold. Stale air clung to the walls. It was identical in layout to hers, same bay window, same narrow bedroom, same kitchenette. But everything felt wrong. The light was duller. The silence thicker. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Dust coated every surface. Cobwebs hung in corners like skeletal lace. The air smelled of damp wood and something else, something metallic. She moved into the lounge. The window across from hers was slightly open. As she approached it, she felt a wave of nausea. Her own flat stared back at her, bright and warm in contrast. Then she noticed the mirror on the far wall. It was a full-length mirror, oval, framed in ornate brass. She approached it slowly. And stopped. The reflection was off. She could see herself, but not as she was. In the mirror, she stood straighter. Her hair was neater, her expression more confident. Too confident. This version of Clara didn't look afraid. She looked amused. Clara stepped closer. The mirror. Clara remained still, then, suddenly, smiled. A wide, knowing smile. Then she lifted her hand. And tapped once on the glass. Clara staggered back, heart racing. It was just a mirror. Just a mirror. But then she heard something behind her. A soft creak. The sound of a door opening slowly. She spun round. The bedroom door, which she had not touched, was ajar. And there were footprints in the dust, bare feet, leading out of the room and stopping just inches behind where she stood. Clara stared at the footprints. Each one perfectly shaped, etched into the thick dust like a quiet accusation. They were the same size as hers. Same arch, same narrow heel. Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't alone. Slowly, she backed away from the bedroom door, her eyes fixed on the dark opening that now yawned like a mouth. The air around her felt tighter, heavier, as though the walls themselves were closing in. She forced herself to speak. "Hello." No answer. Only silence. Clara reached for her phone, its screen lighting up in her hand. She opened the camera and pointed it at the doorway, hoping, stupidly, that the lens might catch something her eyes couldn't. But there was nothing. Just darkness. Still, the feeling didn't fade. A memory flickered across her mind, something her mother used to say when Clara had nightmares as a child. If something follows you in your dreams, don't run. Ask it what it wants. Clara took a shaky breath and stepped forward. The bedroom was almost bare. A single mattress lay on the floor, stained and sunken in the center. The wardrobe doors stood slightly open, one hinge broken, creaking ever so gently. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper that had peeled like skin. And on the wall above the bed, written in what looked like charcoal, was a sentence. "You are already in the wrong flat." Her skin turned to ice. She turned back towards the lounge, but froze. Standing by the mirror was the other Clara. She wasn't smiling this time. She looked disappointed. The other Clara tilted her head. Her hands hung at her sides, relaxed, but her posture was eerily calm, like she'd been waiting for Clara to find her. Her eyes followed her every move, but she made no sound. No motion. Just that stillness. Then the mirror version raised one hand and pointed directly at the floor. Clara stepped back into the lounge, gaze darting to where the reflection had indicated. There, near the skirting board beneath the window, was a loose floorboard, barely visible under the dust. Hands trembling, she crouched and pulled at it. The wood lifted with a creak, revealing a narrow cavity beneath. Inside was a box. Black, locked, with a brass latch and an old paper label affixed to the top. Written in faded ink were the words. Clara Haynes. Patient 62B. She recoiled. Patient? What was this? She stared at the box, as if doing so might erase the name from its lid. But it was still there. Clear. Undeniable. She looked up. The mirror was empty. The other Clara was gone. But behind her, in the real room now, came the faintest whisper. A voice exactly like her own. You shouldn't have come here. Clara sat on the edge of the dusty armchair, the black box resting on her lap like it weighed 1,000 bricks. She hadn't dared to open it, yet. Her fingers hovered near the latch, her pulse beating in her ears louder than any sound in the flat. Patient 62B. Her name. Her handwriting, even, on the faded label. But Clara had never been in a hospital, never been anyone's patient. Not that she remembered. And that was precisely what chilled her. What if there were things she'd forgotten? She undid the latch. Inside were papers, photographs, and a voice recorder, its buttons worn from use. On the top of the pile was a hospital admission form, stamped with the name St. Catherine's Psychological Institute. The patient's name, Clara Haynes. Age, 23. Status, admitted involuntarily. Her throat tightened. She pulled out a black and white photo from underneath the form. It showed her sitting in a bare room, arms folded, hair tied back tightly. Her eyes were hollow. Her expression blank. But it was her. Or, it looked like her. Was it the same person? Suddenly, the air in the room thickened, and the light bulb above her gave a sickly flicker. She grabbed the recorder and pressed play. A low static buzzed for a moment, then a voice crackled through. It was male, posh, clinical. Patient 62B exhibits advanced dissociative symptoms. Recurrent hallucinations. Believes she is being watched by another version of herself. A pause. Control test has been authorized. Subject will be moved to the Wexcombe Observation Unit for final phase monitoring. Memory suppression initiated. Clara dropped the recorder, her hands trembling. Wexcombe. She had moved to Wexcombe just a few weeks ago. The name hadn't triggered anything, until now. Another paper caught her eye, a schedule marked Phase 2. Dates, times, checklists. One column titled Reintegration. Reintegration. Before she could read further, there was a sound from the hall. A light knock. Followed by the turn of the doorknob. Clara shot up, backing into the corner, her eyes locked on the door. It creaked open. And there she was again, the other Clara. But this time, she stepped into the flat. No longer a reflection. Real. Tangible. Alive. And she was smiling. Clara stumbled backward until her spine met the cold wall. The other Clara stood calm, serene, even, in the doorway, her hands clasped in front of her as though she were arriving for afternoon tea. No one spoke. The silence was louder than words. You're not real, Clara whispered, her voice hoarse. The other Clara tilted her head, smile unwavering. Is that what they told you? Her voice was identical. Everything about her was identical. Clara scanned the room for something, anything, to defend herself with. Her eyes darted to the fireplace poker beside the armchair. I'm not here to hurt you, the other said, stepping forward. I'm here to help you remember. Clara's grip tightened around the poker. Stay back. But the woman didn't move any closer. Instead, she looked around the flat with a curious nostalgia. They let you keep this place. How sweet. I wasn't so lucky. You're lying, Clara hissed. Who are you? The smile dropped. I'm the part they locked away. Clara's heart sank. You don't remember what they did to us. But I do, the woman continued, her voice sharp now. St. Cathers. The experiments. The forced suppression. They called it healing. But they were building something, splitting us. Splitting us. Clara echoed, cold sweat running down her back. They created two versions of you. One they could control. One they couldn't. Guess which one I am? Clara's breath caught in her throat. You were the failure, she said slowly. The one they erased. The woman chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. No, darling. I was the truth. The poker slipped from Clara's fingers, clattering to the floor. The room felt like it was tilting. I'm here because it's happening again, the woman said. They're watching. The test is still running. Clara's knees gave out, and she sat heavily on the floor. Why me? She croaked. Because you're the variable, the woman replied. You're the one they couldn't predict. That's why they kept you here, in Blackfin. That's why I had to find you before they reset you again. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Then, a phone rang. But not Clara's. The woman pulled a black phone from her coat and glanced at the screen. Her smile returned. They know I've found you. Clara stared in horror. What happens now? She whispered. The woman leaned in, voice low and urgent. Now we run. They ran. Down the narrow back lane behind Clara's flat, through the overgrown path behind the cemetery, their breath turning to fog in the cold night air. The woman, Clara's mirror, moved like she knew exactly where to go, dragging Clara with her by the wrist. They'll try to sedate you, the woman warned. That's how they did it last time. You don't remember, but I do. Clara's head pounded with every step. Her thoughts were in chaos, none of this made sense, but her gut screamed that it was real. Terrifyingly real. They ducked behind an old stone shed near the churchyard. The woman pulled out the black phone again and tapped rapidly. I've disabled the perimeter sensors for 5 minutes, she said breathlessly. We have to get into the control house before they reboot. Clara blinked. Control house? Where? The woman pointed through the trees. At the edge of the village, almost hidden behind hedgerows and bramble, was a squat brick building she had never noticed before. No windows. Just a black metal door. That's where they store the backups, the woman said. Clara stared. Backups? Of your memories. Versions of you. Every time you questioned something, every time you got too close, they wiped you and rewound your mind. But this time, they weren't fast enough. The woman glanced at her. That's why you saw yourself in the other flat. That wasn't a hallucination. That was a bleed. Your mind starting to sync with a previous reset. Clara felt bile rise in her throat. They sprinted toward the brick building. The woman typed a code into the panel beside the door. The lock hissed. Inside, it was colder. Harsher. The air was sterile and humming with electricity. Fluorescent lights flickered on as they stepped through a narrow corridor lined with doors. One was labeled, Reset room 03. Subject C. Hartley. Clara froze. That's me. The woman nodded. This is where they bring you to forget. They strap you in, feed you false memories, wipe the rest clean. Then they release you back into the village, like nothing happened. She pushed the door open. Inside was a single reclining chair surrounded by machinery. Cables. Needles. A screen showing familiar images, her childhood, her mother, her walks around the lake. But something was off. The images looped unnaturally. Her mother's expression never changed. A recorded illusion. Why are they doing this? Clara whispered, tears in her voice. The woman looked at her, solemn. Because you were meant to be part of a study. But something went wrong. You woke up. Clara's hands trembled. What do I do now? A low echoed from the hallway. Red lights flashed overhead. They've triggered the lockdown, the woman said. They'll be here in under a minute. She grabbed Clara's shoulders. You can destroy it. The files, the chair, all of it. End the cycle. But if you do, there's no going back. No rewinding. You'll remember everything. Forever. Footsteps thundered in the hall. Clara stared at the control panel beside the chair. And placed her hand on the lever.